So I'm excited to have Eddie here with us from SKOR. Eddie, can you tell people more about who you are, what you do, what is SKOR?
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to chat to you today. I'm a huge fan of HeyTaco, been using the product for a long time. So thanks so much for the opportunity. So a little bit about, I guess, me, originally an Aussie, born and raised, always built companies and teams, and now called New York home. Been here now 10 years, and started SKOR 18 months ago. My vision for measuring culture and helping leaders realize that the most important things in their organization is their people and their culture, and everything else is an output of that, and wanting to change the lives of millions through it.
Eddie, since you used to be a HeyTaco admin, which a lot of people on this call are, any tips that come to mind of being a HeyTaco admin? You're like, if you do one thing, please do this. This really worked for us at Tiny Beans.
So probably the one thing that worked the most was to promote and celebrate the givers, not the receivers. The receivers are the obvious ones that you celebrate, but the ones that we celebrated and also highlighted were the givers in the HeyTaco environment, in the recognition environment. So I don't know if that's something that everyone does naturally, but I guess we were using it from 2015, working with Doug one-on-one on a whole range of things at our Tiny Beans, or maybe 2017, I can't remember when, but that was then, and constantly encouraging people to be the givers, not just the receivers.
How did you do that? Did you celebrate the givers on the leaderboard, or how did you actually promote it?
Yes, every month in town hall there would be a slide, and it'd be the givers. We would share all the time, and then like sometimes I think our head of people would post it, a sort of a screenshot in the chat of like, I want to call out the givers, not just the receivers, because the receivers, are naturally called out, but the givers are not. We tried to celebrate them as much, and it was just interesting to see who they were. You could probably guess them, but really nice for them to be recognized, because they're not always the receivers, but they are definitely the givers.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
So if people really knew you, what would they know about you? Before we talk about culture and how do you measure and all that stuff, who's Eddie?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the prompt. I guess here are a few images I'll share briefly. So my family's from the Ukraine originally. They immigrated in the early 70s. So I was fortunate enough to be born in Australia. So born in Sydney, the beaches of Sydney. Moved to the US, to New York about 10 years ago. And in terms of, I guess, if you knew me, I love golf. I've been playing piano for about 40 years. I started when I was 4.5. I'm usually the karaoke guy when people get together and people want to sing along. I'm usually the guy on the piano. I also do these crazy races called Spartan races that I try and convince anyone and everyone to do. And Una and Doug, we're definitely going to do one together one day soon. And others with Grady, hopefully. And then Sydney, of course, I was there for I was fortunate enough to be there for the New Year's over at Opera House over the harbour. This past New Year's, I have a beautiful family, wife and 4 boys. I'm fortunate enough and grateful enough. And yeah, Tiny Beans was the last business I had, which was an app for parents and families to capture moments and share them with the family. And that was exited about 18 months ago. So that's a quick upshot.
Awesome. Well, I know a lot of people who are joining this call, or at least they've seen my name, but the person behind the name, I'm originally from Croatia, and Eddie was just asking me for some tips for his Croatian trip next year. If you ever need any tips of where to go in Croatia and what to do and what not to do, feel free to reach out as well. Happy to help. I live in Washington, D.C. This is where our whole team is located, in the general Virginia, Maryland, D.C. area. Where I ran a marathon last year, the Marine Corps Marathon. This was my 3rd one, and I've lost toenails, which I would not recommend. So I'm done for a while, unless maybe like New York City. That would be really fun. Came to the US via the line of volleyball. So I played volleyball in college, and this is how I stayed here. And then I speak 4 languages. When you're from a minuscule country like Croatia, you need to speak other languages if you want to get a good job. So my parents put me into language school early on. And then the last thing is, I really love the taco bouquet sticker. Usually people who are on this call know what that means, but the taco bouquet sticker is really my favorite.
Amazing. What are the 4 languages, Una?
Croatian, Italian, English, and Spanish.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's kind of like 2 for 1 with Italian and Spanish. They're very similar. It just requires some practice.
Nice.
All right, Eddie, into the topic of the conversation. So you mentioned Tiny Beans was your second business. So you're a serial entrepreneur. You've been running
Yeah,
companies for a long time. Why SKOR? Why did you start it? What is it? And what's the problem you're trying to solve for people today?
totally. Thanks for the prompt, Una. So I guess upon reflection of, yes, on the one hand, being an entrepreneur and founding companies, growing companies and exiting, they're going to, upon reflection about 18 months ago, is very much really what I was doing was building teams and building high performing environments and building environments in which we're compassionate, we hold people accountable, serve on leadership, and really about teams and really fundamentally people and culture. And really the outcome was, I happened to be in the IT industry and happened to build an app, but really it was about the people. And then upon thinking about this area about 18 months ago, was trying to sort of understand how other CEOs think about it. And I realized that a lot of CEOs don't think about it that way. They don't think about people and culture as number one. They think about, yes, it's important, but not as important as strategy and marketing and sales and everything else. So I'm like, well, how do I convince CEOs and leaders to really think about people and workplaces and culture as number one? And the only way that I've found that I can convince people and persuade is with data and with measurement. And although corporate culture has been around for centuries, there's really no independent measure for it. It doesn't exist. And there's lots of, I guess, attempts at measuring culture, but everyone's got their own diagnostic. There's no standardization. Everyone's got their own approach. And frankly, if I ask 10 people across their organizations describing to me their culture, I'll get lots of word ramble. And depending on the day of the week would be different. So the vision for SKOR and the problem I'm solving is to measure culture objectively, where every company has a score. It's a measurable score through a degrees of ingredients that we'll talk about today. And then we can decide through, are you a leader? Are you a lagger? How we compare the benchmark. And through that lens, convince more leaders that people and culture is number one through that measurement piece.
What are the reasons why, besides culture not being top of mind, why did you get started? Like, what did you notice through your conversations that people are like, what are the people actually wanting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always think about it in terms of, I guess, people really want to be part of something. They really want to connect with this greater purpose and this greater sense. They also want to understand what their expectations are and how their values align to organizational values. They want to be engaged. They want to be connected at that level. Secondarily, they really want to understand their role in the company winning, their role in them winning, their role in the team. They want to understand that their work matters and their work connects to what their organization's goal, etc., is. And then also they want to learn. They want to have this growth mindset. They want to be safe to try new things. And then through that, organizations can really have incredible profitable growth, right? So for us, it's about understanding how an individual works, and then for an individual to understand what's in it for me, both from a personal development, also financial development. So I think all these things are what organizations crave. It's just, I think the way they go about prioritizing that order is the wrong part. They'll start with the profit as number one, and I think about the profit as the result. Whereas the number one is the inputs to that, which is the people, and the profit is the output. And that's what we're trying to sort of change the mindset.
One question for people who are on this call is, what is the words that people would use to describe culture? If you think about, these are the key ingredients for culture. And when you hear the word culture, what are the first words that come to mind? So if you don't mind dropping in the chat, is like, what is a word that comes to mind when you hear culture? For example, to me, it comes to mind like trust or integrity, supportive community, right? Like a safe space where people can share their ideas, right? Like what are some things, Eddie, that come to your mind when you were thinking about this before you came up with your formula of how you measure culture? What would the words that be that you would use?
Well, just to sort of entertain people, the standard words I would hear people say is, "Oh, we're a family. Oh, we have an awesome culture. We're collaborative. We're really in it together." Like all these very high level words that really are meaningless. I mean, you don't fire your family typically, and you certainly don't hold them accountable. So I don't understand how cultures create a family. I get the intent, which is we want to be compassionate and we want to support people, but you can't ignore the accountability and outcome piece, right? And that's why the whole family piece is different. Now, as I reflect upon the culture that I stand for and what we are at SKOR, is first of all transparency, because transparency links to vulnerability, vulnerability links to trust. Fundamentally, people need to connect through vulnerability and trust and be brave through that, and build and have and be courageous through that. The other one is you want to have this growth mindset. You always want to be learning, always be willing to take risks, always be willing to try your best and be safe to do your best. And that's, again, you can't have an environment that's truly high performance without people feeling they can do their best. And people can't feel they can do their best if they're not safe to try and fail. And again, like in my last company, we actually had wins and fails and celebrated the failures because I wanted people to be comfortable with failing and being okay with that as a means to growing and learning. So, yeah, and it's always about trying to engage and people feel safe to try their best no matter what.
So that's what you heard people saying. And then you set out, how do you actually measure that? Right. So, like, I'll share this, your formula for high performing culture. How did you decide to translate what people are saying to you, what you think culture makes up, into something that you can actually measure?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So first of all, through loads of research and science and personal experience. So this is not just like an overnight, definition. It came up with lots of experience and lots of interviews I had with dozens and dozens of CEOs and personal experience in building teams, and then reflecting upon that. And that's how we came up with the 3 C's, we call it. First of all, it starts with cohesion, which is all about the core behaviors and the common beliefs and how people are connected at that level. And people often talk about core values and link to core values, but the challenge, as you know, is one thing is having core values on the website or on a poster. The other thing is that they're being woven into the everyday life. And that's where HeyTaco is incredible, because you recognize you're catching people in the act of those core values. So cohesion really is a critical piece. The other piece is clarity. So the clarity in terms of where are we heading? How fast are we going when we get there? What's my role in that journey? So the clarity of organizational strategy, clarity of team. It's again going back to what's my role in team and company winning. I want to be connected to that. And frankly, I want to know, so I know the work that I do every day and how I can prioritize my work and focus on those efforts because I know where the team and company is heading. And the third C is courage. That's the environment in which people can feel that they have this mindset around trying their best, this mindset around learning from that, have this transparent, authentic based leadership through that lens. And the other one around rewards, being objective rather than subjective. I mean, so often you hear about rewards and compensation being this subjective randomness of a bonus. It's like courage leans into our goals together, our courage of failures together, and our courage of wins together. And that's going to be objective so people can feel, again, yeah, I'm connected to it. So those 3 ingredients for us form the basis for what an incredibly engaged and high performing culture would be measured by.
Before we go into people actually take, like, if they want to take the assessment and going through the Hey Tacos assessment,
Sure,
how did you create a way for people to get their assessments, right?
sure.
And did you, what you learned through the results that people were getting, did it obviously reinforce your hypothesis of, like, these are the 3 things? Is there anything else you learned through the process of, like, the feedback loop of getting the results based on
Yeah.
the things you're testing people on?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a sort of just to preempt everyone, I know we're going to invite everyone to do the snapshot. So the whole basis of it is measuring the environment, right? And a few other principles worth talking about that is important is that we think the environment are all about measuring the inputs to organizational culture, whereas employment surveys typically focus on the outputs or the results. So we're all about the setup of that culture, which is an important point to sort of decipher. And again, because corporate culture has been around for centuries, but there's no independent way to measure it, I always thought it was important. We have to give people a sample. We have to give people a try of this because it's a new concept. Like there is nothing that you can compare this to in terms of an accessible barometer. So that's why we created the Culture Score snapshot, which I know you talk about shortly, and we'll talk about Hey Taco's one, because we want people to try it and explore it and see with themselves the concepts of it. And then clearly, if that's of interest, then they can go into the more comprehensive one across their organization, and we offer much more to it. But I think it's just important to, again, for me, this is much more about a mission of changing the lives of many and changing the mindsets of leaders. And I think I've got to do that through lots of giving before getting. And the whole snapshot is part of the giving piece, because to your point, like we'll talk about, you're going to get a whole bunch of tips from it, although you haven't paid anything. right? You want to give, and I'm a big believer of giving as part of the process.
How are people that you're working with, organizations that you're working with, leveraging the culture score in conjunction with engagement surveys and pulse surveys?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And what's really interesting about what they're getting from Culture Score is this much more granular set of results that's very focused on the root causes of their challenges rather than the symptoms. So what we found in employment surveys is that yes, you're getting some data. There's a lot of subjectivity and a lot of commentary, and yes, you're getting some results, but the recommendations are sometimes led to focus areas that could be symptoms of root causes. And you're investing all this time in symptoms, and then you realize 3 or 6, 12 months later that actually nothing's really improved. Whereas if you do it in conjunction with SKOR, because we're focused on the leading indicators of organizational culture, you're then getting to root cause. So, for example, is maybe one of the themes of a survey, an engagement survey, is communication challenges. Like there's not enough communications, I'm unsure about what's going on, I don't know, where the organization's heading, communication. So then dealing with a symptom, you might go, oh, we need more focus in our town halls, or we need like a weekly blog from the CEO, or we need better meetings. But actually the root cause is they don't understand their goals and their responsibilities and how they're being accountable. So they're not clear about what's expected of them, which leans into clarity of them and their team and company goals. Nothing to do with communication at all, but it's masked under communication. But really the root cause is they just don't understand what's expected and how they're being measured. So again, that's a really simple example across many I can give you, Una,
Mm-hmm.
around it's all about root cause and moving the needle rather than just on symptoms
Mm-hmm.
and then hoping for the best.
So I want to give a chance for everyone to take the assessment if they want to. So you can scan the QR code, it would take you to the SKOR website where you can take the quick assessment. If you want to, it takes what, 2 minutes, Eddie? Like 3 minutes.
Yep.
It's very simple. Feel free
Yep.
to take it, and then you can bring any questions you might have in real time to us while we talk about HeyTaco's assessment, because both Doug and I took it. Question, Eddie. Tell us more about the assessment. So 10 questions. How does it work? What are you actually trying to get to when you're asking people those questions? And then another one is, who is supposed to take this assessment? Is it for the people leaders, for the C-suite? Who takes it?
Yeah, absolutely great question. So just to qualify, it's the Culture Score snapshot. It's on our website. It's anyone can take it. Anyone can take it, individual contributor, team leader, CEO, etc. Because it's really just your view of what you believe is happening. It's a 10-question assessment. It's all based on leading indicators. So you're seeing the style of questions. Every question is a score. There's no comments, there's no feedback. It's just a measurable question out of 10. And then through those questions, we're basically then scoring you, and then you get an output of your score out of 100. And then we break that score down by cohesion, clarity, courage. And based on what your score is, we'll provide a series of tips and recommendations of what you could do to improve your score. Right. So it's a very simple assessment to your point, and then you get a full report in your inbox, PDF, fully automated. And the whole reason for it is because it's all about this input. This sort of entry point to the platform is really the sample exercise. But differently, if you wanted it for the whole organization, then that's when it's a much more comprehensive assessment. We look at all the people leaders, not just an individual. It's a much more comprehensive 50-question assessment, not just 10, and much more comprehensiveness in terms of benchmarking, because this is just your own view of your own company. Whereas what we do in the comprehensive one is we benchmark you against the industry average and share with you specific details of how you're a leader or a lagger, and then a full business case, and it's a whole bunch of other aspects. But this anyone can take. I'd love everyone to take it here and then give feedback of what you think has been useful, what you think could be better. It's free, no obligation afterwards to try. And we've had lots of great feedback of like, Eddie, this is great. We're just going to take this forward and get on with it, right? You don't need. And also just one thing, it doesn't have to be the size of organizations. You could be 5 people or 500 people. It's really interesting to try and share it with your teams.
So I took it because I was curious, and a couple of us took it, and it was a great conversation starter. Like, oh, what are we actually doing well or not? So when you see our scores, Eddie, Can you tell me what you see? I'd love some actually like real-time guidance of this is good. What does good look like? Right? Like, okay, it's 25 good. I don't know. 18, 38. What's good? And what do you see as areas for improvement in each of these categories that you think we could start doing today?
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, at a high level, let's start with a top line of 81. You're outstanding. I mean, 81 is definitely very, very high score. Congratulations. You guys have a fantastic culture, and clearly that shows in terms of how you work together and the success you've had. So definitely 81 is a great score. It's above the industry average. Definitely, because I think the highest industry, I think, sits at 75 or 76. I think we just posted our last set of culture report. So it's high above the industry average. So that's number one. As you break it down to each, again, it's probably going to be, you're not no surprise, but cohesion clearly out of 30. So you have a very cohesive team. Your core values are connected. Everyone has shared beliefs. Now, clearly, it's your view and Doug's view, right? It's both of you, but again, I wonder what the team thinks, right?
It'd be
What
fun
they're
to
standing
take
for.
with everyone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, as we know that what we think as leaders is one thing, reality is often something else, and there's clear bias. No matter how unbiased we think we are being,
Of course.
there's this natural, I guess, optimism, and that's what this will identify. And that's what you want. You don't want to be biased. Ideally, the outcome should be reality, so you can improve, right? So, but cohesion shows that it's a really high score for core behaviors. Clarity could be better. So clarity is around what's our organizational strategy? What is our goal this year? Like, what is our team goal? Like, what are the metrics that I should be focused on to contribute towards the team and company winning? And what's interesting about clarity is that it's kind of obvious that so many people do it poorly, and actually not many people do it regularly and update it, because strategy needs to evolve as an organization goes, and sometimes goals need to evolve, but sometimes they're just not really shared with the team. So they don't understand like the work that okay, things have changed and the CEO and leadership team knows that changes, but does the team know? Like, how does it affect them? And more importantly, why did it change, for them to know the why and then be connected to that. And that, again, another thing that's often not done. So clarity, it's interesting. Clarity for a bunch of industries is quite poor because leadership keeps on wanting to change the mountain we're climbing because of some sort of pivot or market forces. So clarity is definitely one that could be improved. But again, I would probably suggest some simple. Here's our strategy for the year. Here's our goal for the year, and just every month, how are we marching towards that? And using that to learn and have the team contribute towards helping fix and improve. And then courage.
Jenny, before
Obviously,
you go to courage, Jenny, I wanted to share with you two thoughts. One,
okay.
on clarity, I had a colleague who used to say it's not reality unless it's shared, right?
I
I
like
have
it.
my own version of like, I think I know what we're working on. How does you just assume everyone thinks exactly the way you're thinking? Like it becomes
Yeah,
your background of obviousness. And she would always say it's not reality unless it's shared. You got to share reality and get alignment with other people. And now you all have clarity about what we're doing. So I thought that
yeah,
was really interesting as I was reading through a description of what to work on. I thought of that quote of it's not reality unless it's shared. And
I
then the
love
second
it.
thing is I recently read a really good book called Extreme Ownership. It's from
Yes.
a former Navy SEAL leader. And one of the things he said is you have to communicate the why. Like when he was working with the Navy
Mhm.
SEALs, if you just say, we're climbing this mountain, people might be grumpy about it. They don't want to climb a mountain with a bunch of gear at 3 in the morning in a foreign land. But if you
Yeah,
communicate the why we're climbing that mountain and why is this important and what is the goal we're after, the mechanism, people are like, okay, we can do that, right? They understand what the impact is. And sometimes it's
totally.
easy because the why is in our head and we just forget to communicate it, right? But sharing the why, even with small things, can really help people understand and get buy-in of, oh, I get it, right? Now I'm
Totally.
aboard because I understand we're not just doing this because you had a change of heart or you woke up feeling like you want to do that. So those are
Totally.
some two things that I was thinking in relation
I
to your.
love it. I love it. But just on that, right? Explaining the why, I love, like, here's where we're heading. But the other thing that a leader doesn't do often that I think they could is ask the individual, what's your role in this? Like, how could you contribute to this why? How could you contribute to this mountain we're climbing? What's your role in it? They're like, well, I don't know. I'm really just this person. Well, what does that mean? And you use it as a means to coach and develop the person for them to understand and be connected to that overarching strategy. And that's another thing that's not done well. leaders feel because I've shared it, it's done. But actually, you want shared buy-in, where individuals feel like they're bought into it. So understanding the why is one thing, but then asking them what could be your role in this why, I think will also have more buy-in and a greater sense of connection to the outcome.
What about onto courage? What do you think about courage? What's the
Courage, you guys crush it. I love it. So courage out of 40. So it's my favorite one. I mean, they're all amazing, but if you said like which one's a killer one is courage. Courage is the hardest one, right? Because you've got a level of transparency that needs to be understood, a level of understanding of a growth mindset. So being absolutely comfortable with failure and celebrating that. Awards or rewards need to be linked objectively, and there's a level of authenticity that needs to be done with courage. And leaders, it's ironic, right? Because leaders of like decades ago, if you share that everything's great and you have to solve all the problems, that was deemed to be courageous of the past. Now, courage is really the vulnerable ones to go, haven't got all the answers. What do you think? These are the areas I need help with. Can you help me here? Can you help me there? That's actually being courageous in the true Brene Brown, like vulnerability. So courage is really incredible because people connect to leaders that are being courageous and vulnerable and want to contribute to them and win together. And again, when I say leaders, I'm talking about accountability, not necessarily of a boss, because you're one team. I've always thought, the titles aren't anything important. You're all one team trying to contribute. So courage is vital to be able to have shared trust and understanding together.
Before my next question, I'm curious if anyone has had a chance to take the assessment, if they have any questions. Feel free to post it in the Q&A or in the chat. Either works for us. And then Eddie, if people were just getting started and they said, hey, I have these 3 scores, what is one practical tip in each of these categories that you would suggest people do today? Like if you're going to do one thing for cohesion, start doing this.
So it's a great question. So without understanding the data, if just at a high level, like the more obvious one, the cohesion ones would be trying to catch people in the act of living the core values. So this is not a I guess you're all HeyTaco customers, so it's not about another vote for HeyTaco, but HeyTaco is amazing in recognition, and recognition is amazing for the right values. So I think recognition integrated to weaving your core values in the everyday is often massively missed. I speak to companies all the time and they've got their core values. They go, here's our brochure of our core values. I'm like, okay, let me go ask someone in their team, what do you think the core values are? And they're like, oh, I think it's accountability and I think it's meant to be integrity. And I'm like, no, what do you think? So, so recognition is a key one, and it's some form of recognition. Doesn't have to be a tool, it could be as well as a tool, town halls, reminders, all that. One thing for clarity, he just did 2 things. What is our strategy for the year? In one line. What do we want to achieve? What's our strategy for the year? Grow market share. We want to be known for X. We want to, whatever it is. And what's our single most important goal for the year? Just the goal, one goal. What are we all marching towards? That was one thing that most organizations fail at, is not understanding what the goal for the year is. What are we all marching towards? Are we looking to grow more customers, more Google reviews? And I'm not saying a goal for revenue, like a North Star goal, like something that's meaningful. For you, it might be, 1 billion tacos given away this year.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that has impact because people are recognized through it, and that's what happens. So then you need customers and people to buy you. But that's the byproduct of the purpose. The clarity is the purpose, right? So really linked to a North Star goal, not a boring goal that people can't connect to. And the courage piece, the number one thing would be celebrating failures and being okay to fail, and some form of that. In my last company, we had a weekly wins and fails meeting. Everyone would get together once a week. And again, depending on the size of company, it could be in team, where you share a win for the week and a fail for the week. And I wanted people to really be comfortable with a failure and trying their best and learning from it. What did you learn? How can we get better? Learn from each other. So just having a growth mindset, but leaning into that. And the only way I found to be truly effective is to celebrate the fail, celebrate the learning, and then people will be more comfortable. That's probably the biggest thing for courage. And there's lots of others, but that's the number one that I'd love to see more of.
I love the fail meeting. Now you have to actually think about what am I going to do this week that might not work out?
Yeah.
I fail and learn something. It really stretches your thinking and your doing.
But also what I love about it is that you're vulnerable with your failure. So people hear that like, oh, like, I mean, I would, yeah, yes, I was a CEO, but I would say like, I really screwed up here. I really positioned it wrong. I should have done it differently. And I'm like, I like if he's sharing his failure, it's okay for me to share my failure too, because he's not perfect. Of course, he's not perfect, but there's like this whole
Mhm.
natural, I guess, unrelated. You're not connected to the reality of it. Also, you want to like, disarm people. So the way I found it, like, I'm going to celebrate my worst failures because then people will start to be vulnerable and share theirs.
Any questions or thoughts or comments or disagreements from anyone?
We've answered it all, Una.
We've answered it
Yeah.
all. As
The- the-
always, I will
we
follow up with a
we floored
recording,
them. We floored them.
recording and the slide deck and way to reach Eddie if you have any questions. Um, Eddie, anything else from you that you want to share with the audience?
Uh, and look, the only thing I would say is I mean, obviously, you all appreciate culture, otherwise you wouldn't be here and understanding what the HeyTaco impact on your people, right? So clearly, that's incredible. And the key thing is really, I think, is just to continue to lean into all the other elements of culture and all the other elements of team, and really, trying this out, seeing what's out there, just and encouraging the leaders to rethink how they prioritize people and culture. And if there's ever been a conversation people have had where they can't convince a CEO to invest in culture and people, hit me up and let me help you. Because people and culture should be number one, and there's a clear ROI to it. In the past, it's been too difficult to measure, and that's what I'm here to solve. And I want to help organizations with making sure that their leaders truly appreciate their people, invest in them, and by virtue of that, show them the potential profits they're missing out on by not doing it effectively. So yeah, I want to be a helper and supporter of everyone to help us change the movement here.
Well, Eddie, tacos for joining us and tacos for celebrating the givers in your last company. That's really meaningful and impactful and so important. As you said, you can't affect recognition, you can affect the giving. And tacos to everyone for joining us. I appreciate your time and your attention.